Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Keith Manconi. If you listen to the news every day, it can be easy to start to feel like everything is going wrong in Taiwan these days. With stagnant wages, political gridlock, vote buying, and corruption, we might forget just how much is going right over here. Well, we got a bit of a reminder of that recently from an unlikely place. The Germany-based Bertelsmann Foundation recently released a review of 129 developing countries, that is, countries transitioning towards stronger democratic governance and freer market economies. On that list, Taiwan came in first, topping the likes of the Czech Republic, Poland, and even South Korea. To help explain how Taiwan gained such high marks, I recently spoke with Robert Schwartz, one of the project managers for the report. Here's our conversation. Robert Schwartz, thanks for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, the report is the Bertelsmann's Transition Index, and of course, Taiwan did quite well on this. But the overriding theme of the report is one of alarm more than anything else. The world in general, the report suggests, is facing some problems with many of these countries that you assessed sliding back in a lot of ways in terms of their democracy and their economy. So I wanted to start a conversation just by taking a look at the context in which Taiwan's own ratings take place, because the world as a whole, I mean, that just provides an even sharper contrast for what you found in Taiwan.
Yeah, good question. That's right. In fact, we have assessed in the BTI 2016 that the world has become more fragile, more authoritarian, and more conflict-ridden. In the past 10 years, the conditions for peaceful change towards democracy based on the rule of law and a socially responsible market economy have worsened. And our index identifies three main crisis phenomena in these 129 countries that we assess. First of all, the influence of religious dogma on politics and on legal institutions has grown in the 10 years quite considerably. 42 countries are affected, most of them in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, but also in West Africa and East Africa. Secondly, the authoritarian regimes that we already have in our index, they have become more repressive. They especially limit association and assembly rights and freedom of the press, and the number of hard autocracies has grown significantly. Now we have 1/3 of the country sample being assessed as hard autocracies. And third, governments were less successful in managing the cleavages and conflicts in society than in our previous assessments. Almost half of the countries assessed were not willing or not able to assume a moderating role to prevent these societal conflicts from escalating. These three crisis phenomena that I just described are based on disappointed expectations. If the gap between the rich and poor does not close, as in Latin America, if mass poverty remains a persistent reality, as in sub-Saharan Africa, if expectations of reform are disappointed, as in the Arab region, and if welfare promises are not fulfilled, as in East, Central, and Southeast Europe, in that region, then people are susceptible to populism and radical ideologies. And this context of the whole report that I just outlined might be one explanation for Taiwan's top ranking in the report. But of course, Taiwan has also many strengths in itself that distinguish it from other well-performing countries that we, of course, also have in the BTI.
Right, and on that note, let's transfer the focus over to Taiwan, and just let's start with the bare basics. What did you find? What did your assessors find when they were looking at Taiwan, putting this report together?
Well, maybe that's a good point to start to explain what we actually measure in our status index of the Transformation Index. In our status index, we measure, first of all, the progress towards democracy based on the rule of law, and second, the progress towards a socially responsible market economy. And if we look at the democracy side, we have to assess that Taiwan is really a high performer in terms of democratic politics and liberal market policies. On the democratic side, we see that the quality of elections, the absence of undemocratic veto actors, the stability of democratic institutions, and a vibrant civil society contribute to a climate which is democratic by all standards. Taiwan is rated at with the highest score in most of the indicators which assess the quality of democracy. And on the market economy side, we have seen that Taiwan did also well in the review period. Solid growth, low inflation, increased exports, unemployment at less than 4%, and a solid financial sector. One concern that some people raise is, of course, the economic exposure to China, which has grown also in the past 8 years. That would be one concern, but this concern by far does not diminish the positive outlook and the positive assessment that our index provides for Taiwan.
Right, so that gives us a sense of what you found over here in Taiwan, but let's take a look at the slightly deeper question of why Taiwan is on this more positive path. Why is it doing well compared to all these other countries in the world that you have documented are really struggling right now? Did your report find anything in that regards?
The reason for Taiwan's success, both in terms of its quality of democracy and in terms of its market economy, is a quite long ongoing transition process. First of all, in Asia, there are two examples of a quite distinct developmental model, which is South Korea and Taiwan, a developmental model which prioritized economic transformation first and democratized only later. And with the democratization, which also started in the 80s already and was finally achieved in the 1990s, with this historic trajectory, Taiwan looks back at a positive development towards democracy. And it is not just the current government that can be credited for its success. The previous government, the KMT government, which we assessed in the report, but it's the already existing tradition of democratic practices, a vibrant civil society, and an extremely successful economic development, which Taiwan has seen in the past decades, which contributes to the high ranking of Taiwan.
Now, I kind of just have to say, I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect many of our listeners are going to be somewhat surprised that Taiwan did as well as it did in your assessment, just because when you live here, I mean, there's just a ton of anxiety on the street, on the news, about so many social problems in Taiwan. You know, you have the stagnating wages, you have difficulty in expanding Taiwan's trade with other countries. You have corruption, very well documented cases of corruption that a lot of people are worried about. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago, just back in 2014, that the legislature was occupied by hundreds of young people, students. I mean, that is not typically seen as a sign of a stable, business as usual, competent governance. It's not a sign of any of those things. So tell us a little bit, what do you think the disconnect is there? Are we just too close to these problems? Is there another perspective that we should be thinking about?
Ironically, what you described, the vibrant civil society that is active in Taiwan, and the problems that people obviously see in the functioning of a democracy, we see this in many countries which perform well on the index. That the perception of the functioning of democracy is quite lower than the actual status. So. Of course, the occupation of the parliament has been a disturbing event in Taiwanese history, but actually this happened in the review period of the current BTI 2016, which looks at the period from January 2013 to January 2015. And our experts agreed that this occupation was not a great challenge to the functioning of the democracy in Taiwan, but rather an expression of a vibrant civil society. And coming back to your question, the fact that people perceive democracy not as functioning is a quite common fact which we see in many top-performing countries in the BTI. The Uruguayan democracy also is perceived as having or is internally being perceived as not performing well by some people. But this competition, this political competition, which sometimes goes over the top, is sometimes also a sign of a well-functioning democracy.
So in a way, I mean, the administration did have some of a response to the occupation. There was promises to pass oversight legislation for cross-strait agreements. Of course, that hasn't been passed, but, there was some kind of a response to the occupation. So I guess based on what you're saying, perhaps we could see it as a sign of strong civic engagement in Taiwan more than anything else.
Yes, I think we can see it this way. Taiwan has experienced a change of power several times. Now, for the second time, the DPP has come into power. This is a sign of a functioning democracy and a well-functioning democracy. And the vibrant civil society active in Taiwan has made this possible. So in most countries that we assess, we have not seen one peaceful, truly democratic transfer of power. So when we look at the Taiwan results, we also have to put in perspective at the sample of countries, 129 countries we are looking at here. And comparing to other Asian and Oceanian countries, Taiwan by far outperforms all the others, even South Korea, which has also some problems in its democracy now.
All right, so we've been pretty positive so far up to here, mostly just talking about the strong points in Taiwan, but your report did identify a couple of issues that need to be addressed. And I think the first and foremost, it talked a lot about the judiciary and some of the issues seen as compromising the objectiveness of those serving as judges and serving in the judiciary. Could you talk a little bit about what the survey found there?
Yeah, the judiciary is still seen as a weak point since there are concerns over politically biased judges and high-profile cases and the political-driven selection of high-level court personnel. So we have assessed Taiwan's judicial system as a weak point here, but these weaknesses are not comparable to those weaknesses that we see in many of the other 128 other countries that we assess. So in overall, looking from a bird's eye view, the separation of powers and the rule of law in Taiwan, including the judiciary, is still working quite well.
And just to kind of wrap things up, I mean, I really want to get back to this question of what separates Taiwan from the countries that your report sees as somewhat less successful in these metrics that you're measuring. I mean, maybe we can just ask this in a really broad way. What are the signs that, a country is going to be on a path towards strengthening democratic institutions, strengthening economy, or, on a very different path, on a path towards, chaos and less strong institutions? Are there any things that you can point to look for so that we can get some sense of what path a country is on?
One premise of our analysis is that we have to look at transformation processes towards democracy and market economy holistically. So democracy will not work in a country where, in the long run, socioeconomic demands of people are not being met, social exclusion is widespread, and the gap between rich and poor is widening. This is one of the reasons why in the current report we see democracy struggling, because people feel that their demands are not being addressed by the political parties, by the political elites. And So democracy, the functioning of democracy depends on the functioning economy and socioeconomics. And on vice versa, many examples have shown, Taiwan is one exception here, but many examples have shown from around the world that socioeconomic progress usually works better in an environment of competitive political systems, with the possibility to replace an authoritarian government by a democratically elected new leader who can bring those demands from society into the political process. And this is probably the biggest exception that Asia poses as a whole, with having South Korea and Taiwan as two examples, having developed the economy first and then democratizing, and several other countries like China, like Malaysia, going the same path with an open end.
So I guess if we just take that logic and apply it to Taiwan, then really the thing that we're going to be wanting to pay attention to see if Taiwan is going to continue on this path is just how responsive is that government being to the needs of average citizens? How much are they responding to those needs and carrying out what average citizens really want in Taiwan? Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, whoever wins the election in Taiwan has to pay attention to the demands of society, and the conditions for the DPP government now are better than in the previous presidency of them, because now they have a double majority they have the president, and then they also have the majority in parliament. So the conditions for the DPP to perform are better now than in the deadlock that we have seen in its past term in office.
All right. Well, we will keep our eyes on all of that. The full name of the report, once again, is the Bertelsmann Stiftung's Transformation Index. You can find it online. We have been speaking today to one of the report's project managers, Robert Schwartz. Robert, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. Taiwan Talk is, of course, ICRT's weekly interview segment, bringing you conversations from and about Taiwan, broadcasting each Monday at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. at the end of the top of the hour news segment. You can find extended versions of these interviews, such as the one that you just heard, online at the ICRT website and on iTunes. If you do listen through iTunes, please take a second to rate and review the show when you're done. Helps other people discover the program and also lets us know what you're thinking, which is really important. You can also send us a message, reach out to us through our Facebook page. We'd love to hear what you have to say about the program. Good, bad, ugly, whatever you got, helps us decide how we're going to make these things. Well, that is it for the show today. For ICRT and Taiwan Talk, I'm Keith Manconi. See you next time.